we're a little weighted on the ADHD side of neurodivergence now.
We are, but I thought you were in the process of
Writing an
ASD.
intro? Oh, yeah, I'm in the process, but
So
I don't know yet.
Well, I mean, you kind of probably know, just not officially.
Hello, and welcome to the Inner Moxie podcast, a podcast about not one, but two neurodivergent adults trying to live their lives on the Neuro D list and not hate themselves in the process. I'm your host, Ronnie.
And I'm Zanny.
And this week, we will be talking about masking. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, so before we get into all of that, where are you on your inner Moxie meter? 0 being you want to die, and whatever number is the highest you can think of, you're living your best life, and you could do no wrong.
Googleplex. No.
Sure, let's Google it.
I would say I'm gonna go with a high point of 5, and I'm gonna say a 3. I'm right there in the middle. This is a relaunch of the podcast,
sure.
And so I am nervous about some of our new setups, but I'm also really excited about it, and couldn't hope for a better group of people in front of and behind the microphone. So, nerves and excitement, and that equals out to a 3. It gives me a nice right down the middle, whatever the middle happens to be.
That's great. I kind of feel similar, but also I had a really wild, amazing experience this morning.
Ooh.
I don't want to sound like a fucking la hippy dippy whatever, but like I have been super into, as in like intrigued but afraid of like meditation. And I'm just like, how do I meditate? Like I can't, and it's just like, maybe meditating is just being in my body. Maybe I don't have to try and do this for 30 minutes at a time. Maybe I don't, like I was like, okay, just stop building this up and just try it. Right. So I did that this morning, and I didn't do it for very long because I didn't think I had a long time. It's a practice, right? Like,
right.
And today was day 1. And I was thoroughly impressed because this is going to sound fucking crazy. Okay, but whatever. It's what happened. I was breathing, and I just felt really connected to something more. And I could feel it like flowing into like my arms and my hands and my wrists and stuff. And it was just like the weirdest experience. And I was like, if this is what meditation is, no wonder the people that can do it are super into it.
Right.
Because this feels so different than my normal experience in my body. And I wouldn't even say that I was just like in a trance or on another plane. I definitely was not.
Right.
It was just an interesting, I don't know. I'm just curious to see what's going to happen tomorrow. That's all. So like all of that to say, I think I'm going to go with the 10-point scale, and I would probably be around a 9.
Nice.
Maybe a 9.25. I don't know.
Ooh, maybe even higher.
I mean, this was like a very oddly spiritual experience for me that I'd never had in my life before, and didn't expect it.
I'll say this. I actually really I go in and out of it, but I'm big on meditation, and we've talked about it before. I'm not a spiritual person. Yeah. I'm a very scientifically minded person. But if you want to get over, I know this is dumb because it means the same thing, but like one trick I would use to get over the feeling kind of woo woo about it is it's the same thing, but instead of meditation, call it mindfulness. But I think it's a totally amazing tool, and it is kind of that thing of like, you do feel more connected to everything and more connected to yourself. And I think like that kind of the idea that you could be in that state in it, like I've only, gotten to it in fleeting while doing all the, exercise and stuff like that. But like that you could look at your body and recognize like, it doesn't stop you from being mad, but like that you can sit back and go like, oh, my body's being mad right now. That's what I'm being right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of weird acceptance on, like, I don't want to call it another level, like a guru type other level. I don't even know if we're supposed to say guru anymore, but
we'll bleep in something better or bleep it out.
I think it's
all right. But yeah, I think it's a really cool tool, and I'm glad you enjoyed your first go at it.
Thank you. I am too. I mean, I've tried guided meditation to fall asleep, and I'm just like, I'm sitting there for hours because this person that's saying whatever they're saying, I'm like, I'm actually following this like trail with them, and now I'm not asleep, and I'm relaxed, but I'm not asleep, and I thought this was supposed to put anyway. I just get into that space,
Right?
you know, the ADHD-ness of it all,
Yeah.
or the neurodiness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, don't sell ADHD short. It has its special things.
It does. It can definitely without medication, and at night, you know, there's no medication. You know, if I'm listening to something new, I can't fall asleep because I'm really curious. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Some people can just fall asleep no matter what. And I'm like, I need to know. I can only fall asleep listening to something I've heard before, even if it's boring stuff.
Right.
Well, before we even talk about masking, I do think it is appropriate to talk about what neurodiversity is, right?
That's a good call. I think so.
Because, you know, you and I know, you know, what that is. I recently found out, like, last summer, 2023. But, you know, there may be people who don't understand what that is.
Yeah, no, and I think it's good to point out. And quite honestly, I selfishly know how the term applies to myself and some of my friends. So I may have questions for you because I know you did some research.
I did. Nominal internet research. Yeah, so there were a couple different like descriptions of what it actually is, but I keep finding myself going back to the Cleveland Clinic, which randomly, you know, you would think that, you know, the Mayo Clinic would come up more, or WebMD or whatever, but like the Cleveland Clinic has very thoughtful ways of putting things, as I've found, for a few different topics, which is strange because like, who are you, Cleveland Clinic? But I'm here for you. I'm happy that you're making a name for yourself. I like their definition better than Harvard. So watch out, Harvard.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Cleveland's coming for you.
Cleveland rocks.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Okay, so they describe being neurodivergent as a non-medical term that describes people whose brains develop or work differently for some reason. This means that the person has different strengths and struggles from people whose brains develop or work more typically. While some people who are neurodivergent have medical conditions, it also happens to people where a medical condition or diagnosis hasn't been identified. And I think that is a pretty good working definition of what that is, because if you're not able to do things like everybody else, you know, whatever standard that is, you're probably within this community, whether you have an official diagnosis or not.
Yeah. Well, and two, I know diagnosis is a big thing, and it'll probably get its own episode at one point, but you know, in a perfect world, I would love for everybody to be able to immediately get access to a diagnosis. But the reality of it is, depending on which particular form of neurodivergence you have, the screening process can be longer or shorter. And, you know, we don't have a great healthcare system in this country. And also there's a lot of social stigma and a lot of other things that might stand in your way from getting that official diagnosis.
Oh, definitely, for sure. I know that like the most commonly applied diagnosis associated with neurodivergence would be the autism spectrum disorder. But then also, you know, ADHD is like right behind it. Right. And those are the two, like, you know, headliners, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah.
But like, just so that everybody is, you know, kind of aware that, you know, anyone who thinks outside of the box, or just, you know, this works for 99% of people, but it doesn't work for me, like, you're probably in here somewhere too. But like some other diagnoses associated that I found from the Cleveland Clinic. Also, they listed them out. Just so that, you know, other people, if you don't know if you fit in here and you're looking for like, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
So some
You're
of the
not alone.
You're not alone,
Yeah.
and you belong here. So some of the other diagnoses in here are Down syndrome, dyscalculia, which is difficulty with math, dysgraphia, difficulty with writing, dyslexia, difficulty with reading, dyspraxia, difficulty with coordination, intellectual disabilities, mental health diagnoses like bipolar disorder, OCD, anxiety, depression, you know, things like that could be in there. Sensory processing disorders, social anxiety, Tourette syndrome, et cetera, et cetera. But these were the ones that were just on there.
Right.
Which I think it makes sense, you know. Be it, you know, a brain thing directly or something that affects your behavior in a way that people just kind of like look, you know,
right.
It definitely leads to the need for masking, I would say.
Well, and I feel bad because even as somebody who is neurodivergent, I kind of, like I said at the beginning, I tend to think of it as ADHD and autism. And I know there's so much more underneath that umbrella that I'm trying to keep in mind as I go throughout my daily. And like, we don't fucking need gatekeepers on it. And I certainly don't do that. But yeah, it is nice to have a working understanding of the term. It
is. And, you know, it's open to debate, I'm sure. I don't know. I'm not following a ton of communities about this.
Right.
But I did find, and this was interesting to me, that this movement kind of started actually in the 90s, which I had only literally heard of it maybe a year and a half ago because someone came into my office because she was having difficulties being placed on a case at work. And so I brought her in to like talk to her about it. And she just looked at me and she goes, well, I'm a divergent. But she said it like that. And I had never heard this before. And so in my head, I'm thinking like the movie? Like, what? Like, I don't understand. Looking back with all the things that have happened to me and all of the things that I feel like I know about this stuff now, I'm like, this is what she meant.
Right.
You know, but I was just like completely thrown. And just to, if I know the term neurodiversity, I'm sure most people do, because I feel like I'm usually the last to know as far as these things, trends or whatever.
But you're affected by it. So that I think bumps you up the list a little bit.
Yeah. But I didn't know I was affected by it officially until the summer also.
Yeah.
And then, you know, even now it's like, it's hard to identify sometimes with the community, to be honest, because it's nice to find a group where I feel like I belong, but then it's hard to trust it. And that's a me thing, you know, that's a process. You know, I understand that. I'm sure that they welcome me with open arms. I just am like, do I really fit here? Which obviously I do on paper and my brain and feelings and all that. Like, I feel it. It's just like, do I land here? Like, what do I do? I've never really identified with so many people at once before.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think like one of the, it's weird because the things that like I've noticed that and not like the only one, but neurodivergent people tend to find each other even before they know they're neurodivergent.
It's hard to keep company with people that constantly tell you that what you're doing is wrong or not normal or unnatural or you shouldn't be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. And I think, but like, I think it's this weird, like, collection of little things. So like, I remember, I think it was like one of the first things we talked about when we met. I just brought up that neurotypical people don't hear the electricity in the walls.
Yeah. I can't stop thinking about that still.
And when I heard it, that was the same thing of like, what you mean silence actually exists for you? That's not just a theory, you know? But like, I find that with neurodivergent people we kind of like, we have those things. So it's hard because there's not it is this giant thing that impacts our lives in so many little ways. But there's really no giant driving force with all of us. You know, it's almost like, you know, like an island of misfit toys.
It feels like that.
Yeah.
You know, how did you discover that you are one with this community, or you fit in here, or got diagnosed with something? Like, what was your journey? Short version. Or long version.
Yeah, no. And I'm still like, and this is because a lot of like social things and that I have, I'm still very parallel play with the community.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Very not scientifically. I took the medication and it worked, and they were like, "Oh, not hey, the medication worked." They're like, "Hey, he doesn't have ADHD anymore." So I got
but okay.
right. I got re-diagnosed as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Time moves, but that's because I'm old.
And now we're on COVID time, so
Yeah, and like I didn't, when I got re-diagnosed with ADHD, it was like I just remember stuff like I could never read books, and I really liked books, but I was doing like audiobooks. Audiobooks was my way around that, but like I couldn't even retain the stuff from audiobooks anymore. And I remember I was just playing like one of those memory card games with my daughter. And like I just remember like looking at a card and flipping it over, and it's like that is completely gone from my head. Like somebody like that's not okay. That's not right. Like I get not being good at memory stuff, but I was like, this is ridiculous.
yeah.
And so I finally went and talked to my doctor and got that re-diagnosis. And when it was looking into resources for it, I started coming across the term neurodivergent. Just because I know one of the big ones for me was how to ADHD. How to ADHD. It's this woman, I was going to say girl, she's full grown adult. I forget her name, but that's just like the name of her channel is. And she's kind of adorable because she calls everybody brains. So like when hello brains. And like if you have ADHD, or if you have somebody in your life who does have ADHD, I think it's a tremendous resource. And I feel bad I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but
I think she'll forgive you.
Yeah. But yeah, that was kind of, I think, where I started hearing the term neurodivergent, because she talked to a lot of doctors and all the other people diagnosed with ADHD, and then also talked to a lot of people. There's a lot of overlap between ADHD and autism. And so that's kind of where I started hearing the term neurodivergent from.
I see. Okay. I mean, for me, I heard it last summer because Robin said it.
Robin, our producer.
Yeah. I'm sure Paul said it too. Paul, our other producer.
Yeah.
But I knew something was up since I was a kid. My parents did too, because they stopped letting me have red dye in the 80s. And I was like, what does that mean? Because I remember we were living in Santa Clara, so I was 3. I was not 4 yet.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. And they were like, no more red M&Ms. And I was like, what? Like, why? Like,
what did I do?
Why red? Like, it just seemed so nonsensical to me at the time. Like, you're segregating this one color from me. I'm going to become obsessed with red. Like,
you're right.
What's with they weren't like, well, they think that red dye, could make people hyper, and you're hyper. They didn't explain those things. And maybe they did, and I don't remember, because I mean, we're talking about a 3-year-old's memory here.
Right.
But what I extrapolated from that whole thing was like, I can't have things because I'm hyper. And I, looking back at my as a child, I was just like, why does this teacher get annoyed with me all the time? Why is everyone annoyed with me all the time? Like adults, not all of them, but a lot of them.
Right.
And most of the time, my parents aside, my mom, I mean, I was so offended. Earmuffs mom. Maybe you already know this. I don't know. She had a keychain that said, my kids are driving me crazy. And I was always just like so offended by that. But it was probably true.
But still, like, I know this is just a real quick side story. I remember when I turned 13, just like a little gag gift my mom got me. It was a little like road sign plate that said something like, "Oh, now that you're a teenager, you can move out, and you're so, grown, you can move out, start paying your own bills and blah, 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 blah." And like, I really took offense to that because I was like a good kid and I'd never done any of that stuff. And I was like, what did I do?
Yeah.
How dare they?
Right.
I mean, I was at the end of my good kid stage, but not that I was a horrible kid after that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm sure I did drive them crazy. But my mom always said, as an adult looking back on my behavior as a kid, like, she knew I was well-intentioned.
Right.
Like, she knew that I wasn't trying to stir shit up. It's just I did, from curiosity. So, like, and she told me, oh, when you were little, my friends had a really hard time with you. But then you figured out that if you called them mom, then it was like endearing and they were more warm towards you.
Aw.
And I was like, okay, that has to have been I just had a lot of energy, right? Like, I don't know. But so anyway, teachers and people were just always just kind of like a lot of eye rolls headed my way, you know?
Right.
My aunt said, as soon as someone started explaining something, it wasn't even done, I was off and I was doing it, I just was 100 steps ahead all the time, or not getting all the information and starting anyway, things like that. And then, so like I kind of knew that I had some of that stuff, but then, I just kind of made my life work for me, lots of workarounds. And up until 2.5 years ago, when I went from being like an outdoor cat, working, always like as a barista or like with kids, always up and moving, and those sessions are like 2 to 3 hours, and then you move to the next, and there's always a lot of movement and variety, therefore my brain is stimulated. And then you go so far in a profession, and then it comes to desk job time, and I gaslit myself for a really long time because I was like, why am I struggling so hard to sit at a desk? I have an office to my people dream of this. Right. Why do I feel like I'm dying inside? So it was like my last resort to go and get this diagnosis. I was like, okay, the reason I'm even doing this, because I know I have this, right? Like, I'm very familiar with the DSM, with all my million years of graduate school in marriage and family therapy, like, well aware. Well,
I guess that's a good, just as a getting to know you for our listeners and for me too. What is that path of, because you've mentioned working with kids and working with the DSM SM and stuff like that. Yeah. So you want to give like the Cliff's Notes version of how you got there?
Okay. The biggest thing you need to know is I am not licensed in anything right now. Okay. So that's out of the way.
Then I'm not going to drive home with you today. No.
I am a licensed driver in California. I could drive you home, or anyone. That's right. At your own risk. But okay, so I have my master's in marriage and family therapy, and I am ABD in my doctorate, which means all but dissertation. Okay. I just can't want to finish that. And that is a story for another time. But all in marriage and family therapy. Cliff's Notes, I love learning. And realized I didn't want to be a therapist. I just can't subject myself to absorbing other people's trauma, even if I'm getting paid for it, because all of that gets used up with my friends. I don't have that left over for work in that regard.
And from the world, I would like to thank you for not going on to be a shitty therapist just for money. We could use less of those.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I know it's out there. I can't, it's weird. Therapy has a lot of mostly negative, and I understand. I initially kind of want to go to its defense, but it's also kind of self-destructive, especially now that insurance is paying for it, right? Like, they have to cover their ass, and in that crossfire, people don't always get what they need. People don't always get the service that they need. Sometimes they do. Yeah. But sometimes they don't.
I guess I've been pretty lucky with therapy. I've been in therapy twice now, and I'm in therapy now. Not like right now, but earlier today. Oh. And it has been very, very helpful to me. But I know I've also seen it be not so helpful to others.
I think I've been in therapy multiple times over the course of my adult life. And And there's many things that go into it. I generally think you get what you put into it, but I've also never really been in a legit crisis before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first time. Anyway, I'm writing a book about this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail.
Okay.
That's my background. So I feel like I know a lot about, and I'm such a sponge. Like I was on the dean's list, okay, in my graduate career. I love learning the things.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's, it informs the work that I do now and how I interact with people. And it's taught me how to be a better listener and understand how and why people do things that they do and how to not take it personal.
Okay.
So that's really been helpful. But I was also that person in the front. I was friends with one of the adjuncts, and another adjunct who was her best friend told her, what is wrong with Zanny? Like, she is mad dogging me the entire time because I'm sitting in the front row trying to drown out the chatter and the typing and the things going on behind me, and in order to concentrate, and this was way before diagnosis, so just trying to pull it all together and pay attention turns into my resting bitch face, just staring at this professor in the front row in the very middle,
right.
That could probably be very intimidating. I never thought about it till she told me that, and I was like, oh shit.
Right.
Tell him I'm sorry. Sorry, Naveen, but also I didn't know what was happening. I just was trying to pay attention, and you got me really excited about solution-focused therapy at the time, so thank you, guy. But okay, back to this past summer. So I was wanting to I was like, if this is the next 20 years of my life, I'm out. I can't do this. I can't be in an office like this. It has to be me. If I had some kind of medication and treatment, at that point, I tried all the behavioral things I could think of to get myself through that workday. And still I was like, why am I doing this? I feel like my soul is dying a little bit every day. So this was a last ditch effort. So I was like, get the diagnosis, get medication, then I'll be able to handle this. Which that's not how it completely shook out, but I'm certainly glad I did all of that.
Right.
Because my life has changed exponentially since then. And I just can't believe I lived my life 39 years another way.
Right. And I know people, and I think it's totally valid. Because there's certainly other aspects of my health, more towards my body than things that necessarily relate to my mind. But I know there's people that strive to get off medication. I am not that dude. That ain't me. I am, obviously I'm not gonna fight if for some reason I don't. My medication is no longer useful to me. But something we were talking about before the show, I just recently, because there's a Ritalin shortage, or there was.
There's a Schedule 2 shortage.
Yeah, Schedule 2 shortage. And
which are drugs, if you don't know.
Yeah.
Which, the class of drugs that helps an ADHD brain.
Yeah. Also cocaine in that class of drug.
I don't know anything about illegal drugs.
Well, that's why you can't get it mailed to your house. That's why.
Cocaine?
No, Ritalin and Adderall. It's marked as the same class as cocaine. So that's I can.
I mean, it makes
look,
sense.
if you want cocaine mailed to your house,
I've never tried it. I'm too scared.
No, I also have not tried cocaine. Maybe that could be an episode. No.
Let's just do lines of coke and see what happens.
For science.
Wow. For science. Mushrooms, yes. Cocaine, ugh.
They're kidding America about all of it.
That's probably also true. We're kidding.
I can't even deal with coffee half the time. Oh, have you ever drank coffee right after you've taken your brain med?
Well, actually, yes.
I've forgotten.
I just monitor my heart rate.
Yeah, I sometimes I'll forget, I'll take them in the morning, and I'm not a big coffee drinker anyway.
Oh.
So sometimes I'll be I'll take them in the morning, and then I'll be I'll have a cup of coffee because whatever, just happens to be a day when I have coffee. And then 2 hours later, I'll be this was a mistake. I did not mean to do this.
That's never happened to me.
I don't. Yeah, and I just don't deal well with caffeine in general.
Well, that's. I have slung coffee my entire adult life. It feels like if I could get paid a ridiculous salary to be a barista, I would do it.
Right.
It's the perfect level of personal interactions
Mhm.
with people, you know, like in and out, 3 to 5 minutes, you know, the whole thing. I loved all of my customers. Shout out to CDM because that's where I worked
Oh,
when I was a
I thought
barista.
CDM was your customer. Like that was
Corona
their
Del
initials.
Mar,
Oh.
Pete's, I'm talking about. That's the last one.
Hmm.
I mean, I love that whole scene. It's just, you know, can't make minimum wage and live my life.
Right.
Especially as a single person. So,
Right. That does become
the
hard.
show had to move on.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't even know if I finished that story about the ADHD diagnosis and stuff. But I mean, it's just been really great. And like when I first got diagnosed, I definitely, it would like hit me at weird times. I'd be driving and then like tear up. And not because I was sad, not because I felt like everyone failed me, but just the illumination that taking Adderall has given me. And I was scared. I thought I'm basically going to put crystal meth in my body at this point, you know, and that was like bullshit from someone else, rhetoric in my
Right.
head. Okay.
Right.
That wasn't how I actually felt, which is how I was like, you know what, just take the fucking pill. Because like, I don't think this way. My parents don't think this way. So I wasn't raised, you know, anti-medication. It
Right.
was this person I was married to. He was very anti all that. And all that seeped into my head. And so when I really like sussed it all out, I was like, no, I'm doing this. Didn't feel cracked out. Like I kind of thought I might. I talked to the psychiatrist about that too. I was like, I'm really nervous about this. And she's like, well, with Adderall, if you don't like it, you don't have to keep taking it.
Right.
You know, it leaves your body relatively quickly.
Yeah.
So,
which is not great during a shortage, but for trying to make the decision, that's
Yes.
pretty good. Pretty good.
So like that gave me enough courage to try. And then what happened was just all of the sudden, like it didn't feel like magic. And
No.
it didn't feel like, I don't understand how people get high on this. And I couldn't imagine taking a higher dose because your heart would explode or mine would.
Right.
But what happened was like all of the sudden I could triage and order all of the things swirling around in my head like a fucking like Twister from the movie. Like that's how it felt in there all the time with all the thoughts. And it was really exciting and really dramatic and just a lot happening in there. Never boring, but also really hard to get stuff done when you just constantly got like this, you know, destructive thing in your head all the time. Couldn't get motivated to do anything. And being able to order, you know, okay, this is what I'm going to do at work today. And this is what I'm doing at in my personal life, whatever. And then all of the sudden being able to process things that happen in real time. So instead of like shoving them down, shoving them away, it curbed the emotional eating situation that I constantly found myself in, which, you know, because my appetite didn't decrease. Like that's a side effect. People who go on Adderall tend to get all sucked up, skinny, whatever. And like, for me, I was like, it wasn't because I had no appetite. Like, I love food.
Right.
But now I'm just eating when I'm hungry versus like when I eat when I'm stressed out, and I was constantly stressed out.
Right.
So I was constantly shoving
Well,
food in my face.
It is literally a drug designed to help you make better decisions, you know?
100%. And I just, having that, like my life has turned out well up until that point. You know, I had the title, I had just bought a condo, you know, like divorced, but like killing it.
Nice.
But dying inside because the thing I was killing it at was also something that was totally boring at the time to me. No offense, world. Now it is not, and that is a whole other story. But and it has nothing to do with Adderall and my ability to sit there in my office. Still in the same work situation. But yeah, just the things that it gave me were not what I expected. It's so much better. And people around me, like I share my story quite a bit. I don't the last thing I want to do is just make everyone believe that I'm just amazing just because I am, which yes, I'm amazing. I understand this, but also like this also happened and I'm super grateful for it. And it's opened up a lot of doors for me. And so when friends have, you know, kids that are, you know, oh, my kid is, you know, I got to get them, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you know, all joking aside, all feelings about medication aside, I have to wonder what my life would have looked like if this would have happened when I was a kid, which it definitely would have, because I wouldn't have, because I'm a girl. And in the 80s, this was a boy's problem.
I would say 80s, 90s, probably early 2000s.
Probably still, depending on the age and orientation of your psychiatrist.
That's very, very true.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard to impress on people, especially that don't have ADHD. That I've always said ADHD was clearly named by somebody who didn't have it, because there's no deficiency in attention. It is trying to pay attention to the entire world all at once.
Mm-hmm.
It is so much attention going on in your head.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain to them, like, I've always kind of described it as, that whirlwind of thoughts going on in your head, and that before medication, I was kind of wearing like a slippery glove. So I like try to grab onto
wet
things.
Bandit.
Yeah.
Not a sticky bandit.
We'll go with that. But yeah, like I tried to grab on to thoughts and they would just kind of slip through my fingers. Mm-hmm. Like they were there, but like I couldn't grab onto them. And then I started taking my medication and it's like taking off the glove, and like I could just grab onto thoughts now. And it's hard to impress on people how really mild that is, but also how incredibly life-changing that mild change is. Mm-hmm. That you can start doing those things. And so like it's weird because when you start looking at it like cumulatively, or is that the cloud? No,
it's both.
Ooh. I think that's when, like, I don't want to speak for you,
but
both.
Cumulus, I don't know, not sciencey.
All together. When you start looking at it all together, I think that's kind of when, like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's like when the big emotions hit. Like that's when like the tears come when you're driving. But like it's not that huge of a change on the individual decisions. There's nothing, like you said, it doesn't feel like this big, huge thing once you take it. But once those little things start happening, it just feels so gigantic. And it's hard to explain that to people that haven't had the affliction, but B, also haven't had the cure.
Yeah. And to think too, like, is this what it's like for neurotypical people all the time? Which I know, obviously, it's not that simple. But, like, if this is, like, your baseline, like, that's just crazy to me. I just can't wrap my head around that just yet. Because, I mean, with the Adderall in my system, it's like, whatever comes next seems natural. It's like, instead of like, okay, I have this list of things to do, it's more than one thing. I'm dead. I'm going to crawl onto the couch and just not do any of it because I don't know where to start. It's like, well, you're standing in the kitchen right now. You can, take the dishes out of the dishwasher and load what's in there. And then you turn and, I mean, it just seems natural versus like walking into your situation and being like, oh my God, I have to put the dishes away, and then I have to load the dishwasher, and then I have to clean the cat thing, and then I have to do this, and then I have to do this, and then like stress. Like, I don't feel that at all. I venture to say, and this might be a combination of doing EMDR in the summer with Adderall, because it's all kind of like converged at the same time. Explain
EMDR real quick, just because you just dropped that one.
Okay. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is what it is. It's a type of therapy. This is not a type of therapy you just learn as a part of like your curriculum in school. You have to pay a lot of money as an extra. It's an additional certification that a therapist can get.
Okay.
I didn't do it, and it's the only type of therapy I don't really know anything about, which as a client in therapy, that was great because otherwise I'm sitting there thinking, and I tell therapists this, like the last two that I've had, I've said, look, this is my educational history.
Right.
I will be probably trying to figure out what therapy model you're using, what you diagnosed me with, what you're writing in your notes. Like, I might ask to see them. Like, please don't tell me to journal. I'm going to blow my fucking brains out if you do that.
Which seems the opposite of what you're supposed to do with therapy.
Don't tell me what to write. I've been journaling like every day for like 6 months, but not because anyone told me to.
No.
And if someone did, I would be like, nope, not happening. Don't. It's like therapy 101. Like, it is super helpful. It really is. But also, like, that's the first thing you learn in therapy school.
Right.
It's like, okay, just have them journal this about it. I'm just like, okay, but then there's also other things to do. Some people really need to hear that and they've never thought about it. And for most people that might be fine. But for a neuro-D like me, don't tell me to do that.
Right.
I'm going to obsess on that process. And if I don't do it one day, then I've fucked the entire thing up and I'm quitting. You know, it's like all or nothing, or that's how it used to be anyway.
Right.
But like ever since all of this went down, like anxiety has just completely disappeared. I never even finished explaining EMDR.
No.
So in my experience as a client, because I don't really know like the other side of it, for me, I was doing it on Zoom. So it was developed by, I believe, a nurse practitioner or something. Anyway, she was thinking about this trauma that she had and like she was like on a walk and like looking at like leaves, and it just turned into like this rhythmic kind of thing where it was like back and forth and back and forth. And somehow her trauma was relieved, whatever that was. That's the basics of this. I might be botching this. I'm sorry.
Right.
But this is what I understand about it.
You made a very specific point that you're not licensed, so you keep going. You were
Thank
the
you.
expert in this room of unlicensed people.
Okay, great. So what that looked like for me, since it was on Zoom, it was not blinking. It was not like the eye movement thing. I know there's other stuff with like a light bar and stuff. That's none of that. For me, what I would do is, it seemed very simple, and I'm sure they don't really know exactly why it works, but it's empirically valid.
Okay.
So it does work significantly more than other things. It's generally shorter term. So basically, like, all it is like you bring the memory of whatever it is. So like if you're anxious about something, like whatever like comes to mind for you, what that lets you know that you're anxious. Okay, where do you feel it in your body? Okay, you feel where for me, I feel anxiety here. It feels like a huge boulder with just like more boulders like stacked on top of it. Like that's how crushing anxiety used to feel for me. So you bring the memory and the feeling together with the negative belief about yourself or the situation. I'm not good enough, whatever it is. So you bring those three together, and then you just lean back, and then you just go like this, and they tell you where to just follow wherever your brain goes, and it's just quiet for a while, and you just do this, and your brain is going wherever it goes. And they stop you every now and then. You take a deep breath. Okay, where'd your brain go? Okay, start back from there. And you do that like 5, 6, 7 times. I wasn't keeping track.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was waiting for it to fail because I was like, there's no way it's this easy. Like, there's no way. Not that it was easy, but like,
Right.
One of the cool things about it is you don't have to become completely unglued. You don't have to divulge every detail. So it's like a shortish term thing for like big things like clinical depression, anything,
Right.
that is major that would be a lot longer of a stint. So that's what that is.
Yeah, and I remember we didn't end up doing it, but that was brought up somewhere along the line for an option for one of my daughters. And at first, just kind of hearing it, it was like you were talking about, like the flashing light stuff, and it did have kind of those. It smelt kind of like hypnosis regression therapy or something like that.
I was like, wait, they had like patchouli in there?
No. Just kind of had
Light
that
was
vibe
stinky.
about it.
Okay.
Not literally smelt.
Okay. I guess I take things more literal than I thought I ever did.
Yeah.
But I accept me.
I accept you too.
Thank you. And likewise.
But Yeah, no, so it did seem kind of weird, but I remember like going and doing research on it because I was like, well, let me go tell them why I'm not going to send my daughter to this hippie bullshit. And then I was like, oh, this isn't really hippie bullshit. This actually, it did seem to be like legit on the up and up and everything like that. And like you said, there's still some stuff we don't entirely understand about it, but it seems to work. And, yeah, and I thought that was really cool because it did, like, at first it did seem like
It does.
like hypnosis therapy is the one I always go to because that, you know, that was like a big craze, I think, in like the 80s, and it turned out to be mostly bullshit. And
then, like regression.
Yeah, and
people went into past lives and stuff too sometimes.
Yeah, and which was like really dangerous not only for the patient but also, like, I know that was a huge component of the satanic panic, which, you know, threw a bunch of people out to dry, as it were, or under the bus, or whatever the phrase is. But yeah, this is something that's totally not that.
Exactly. You know, I mean, to me, it's as close to an easy button as there is, which it wasn't easy. No. But it wasn't the worst. You know, I wasn't like in the fetal position at any time.
Right.
I actually only really cried in one session.
Oh.
And that was the one where I had to forgive myself, which that happens, you know, like, I don't know if this is a neuro-D thing or not, but like, I have the hardest time letting myself off the hook. I can excuse everyone else's behavior, but for me, even if it's not even something really bad, right, it's hard not to give myself a lot of shit.
My guess would be if it's not a neurodivergent thing, the neuro-D certainly isn't helping, you know?
Yes, for sure. Ooh.
Yeah, well, and too, like, to the point you were talking about of, you know, as close to an easy button or that kind of thing, or also talking like to the medication earlier, I think like it is worth noting that we talk about this stuff as like cures or, you know, this or that, but even when it's managed, we always still have ADHD. Like one of the good examples of that would be that this episode was supposedly about masking at one point. Which is,
we're just not there yet.
Yeah, which is fine. I kind of like this as a safe space. If we can talk about masking later. There'll probably not be a time when we're not talking about masking.
Masking is the undercurrent of everything.
Yeah. But yeah, it is kind of that thing of like, it's always going to be there in one way or another, regardless of the medication, regardless of how easy the easy button is. It is something that we live with in a lot of ways. And then, really quick, another thing I wanted to bring up was when you're talking about, you know, you only had to cry once in therapy. This may be a gender difference, but like I am in therapy so I can cry. There's one of my favorite quotes, and I wish I know who said it. But this, and I'm gonna slaughter it. It's something along the lines of men don't watch, or it doesn't. When men watch sad movies, it doesn't make us cry; it lets us cry. And
fuck society.
Yeah, especially after I heard that, because I am a crier at movies, and
me too.
And even then, I'm still like, I could use more of it. I wish that I hadn't had that thing built up where it's like you're not supposed to cry, because that's stupid. I don't like that at all. Which isn't necessarily an ADHD thing, but I just thought of it when you're talking about therapy and how it can be different for different people and in their different positions in society.
For sure. Well, I mean, okay, on the crying subject, actually. So for me, I've been accused of not feeling my feelings, whatever way that is. So not enough is most of it. Like whatever the emotion is, right. Like my variance is very like, I am middle of the road and there's a little bit, it's like sometimes it's a little gravelly or we might go around a really easy turn or something, but I'm not a major emoter.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I am most
I
comfortable.
kind of get that from you.
Yeah. And for the longest time, I thought I was defective, as in like, I don't cry enough. Like, okay, anytime Sarah McLachlan starts singing and I see a sad looking pet on TV, I lose it.
Yeah.
But the whole thing throughout many different like circumstances in my life is crying means something. And since you don't do that often, you don't have feelings. And like, well, for one, why does crying have to mean that I'm having a feeling, for one?
Yeah.
Like, I do also understand that the chemical compound of a tear is different than that of sweat. I do think that there are things released, toxins, possibly. I don't know the science things behind it. I know those two things are different.
I want to say the fact you even brought that up was super smart. And I wasn't even like my brain wasn't ready for that of like, oh, I guess not. I never even thought about those differences before.
Oh, no?
But yeah, no, just like the brain component of crying.
Well, I think I probably latch on to all of those tidbits that you hear throughout the internet and from people and things because it's been such a thing in my life. And again, not my parents, lots of people have a lot of fucked up shit that happens with their parents and stuff. Like, I'm sure I've got things, but like, the major things that happened to me, they're not on them, and
Right.
This is one of those things that is not on them. A lot of it had to do with, my, when I was married, like crying meant you were getting something, you were getting to the bottom of something or something like that. I'm like, well, why is there so much of a buildup around this crying? And I'm fucking stubborn. And I think this is a neuro-D thing where it's like, you highlight the thing that I do once in a while, you are going to guarantee that I will never do that thing again, whether it's wear a dress or cry. Like, I'm not doing that shit, especially in front of you, because I don't want that kind of attention from you. But, why does crying have to be the thing that shows that you have real emotions?
Right.
And I do. Like, I teared up this morning because... I had that spiritual thing happen this morning, right? But that started really probably yesterday, but I was writing in my journal about, like, yesterday was the first time where I wasn't fearful about thinking about my own mortality or death. Okay. And my cat, Ferratu, I have 4, but Ferratu was the first, and we both really needed each other at the time that we got each other. And we both just like imprinted super hard on each other. Like, our bond is special. But I was fearful of him dying in general, but also like can't imagine life without him. And then yesterday and then this morning, really contemplating, like obviously like I know that this is going to happen. And I believe that when he's gone and then when I'm gone, and all the other cats too, okay, I would love to see, I'll see them again. And that brings me comfort, and I'm not afraid. Where I've been afraid of that my entire life. I've been afraid of going to hell. I've been afraid of mostly going to hell, actually, or dying, or the experience of dying, or how I will die, or, like, and not in like a suicidal way, not in like probably not even in a diagnosable way, but just like, growing up in a Christian church, like, you do things mostly so that you don't go to hell.
Right.
Okay. And like, hell is a very scary place. Dying seemed scary. All the celestial stuff sounded scary to me. And yesterday was the first day where I was like, you know what? I'm in acceptance, and whatever happens, like, I'm excited. I'm excited for what happens in life. I'm excited for what happens that I can find out in this life about paranormal stuff or like otherworldly things. And after that, whenever my time is, I'll be excited to see what happens then too. I've never felt like that. It was like huge, and I don't think I fully grasped how much of a shift that is, because it's literally recent. Yeah,
I mean, death is a hard one. It is a hard pill to swallow. It's I am not nearly so science minded that I know this is true or not. But like, I feel like it's one of the things that separates us from other animals is our knowledge of the fact that one day we will be no longer. So yeah, I could totally see that as being something that got you moving.
Yeah.
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 Well, I was gonna say too, of in your defense, and not that you need defense for this, you should be able to, never cry, and your emotions are still valid.
Thank you.
But like, I think it was literally last week, I had to stop talking about the never-ending story because you were about to cry.
That's true. That happened. You were talking about, God, what's his name? The big rock guy.
Rockbiter.
Yeah. You were talking about his death scene, and I was getting emotional. I was like, first of all, I've seen that a million times as a child.
Spoiler alert for a movie from 1984.
Yeah, if you didn't watch this in the 80s or
90s or 2000s,
you probably won't watch it now.
You should, though. It's amazing.
Or you could read it. Yeah, true. Like, I do get emotional about those kinds of things. And I know I can feel it when I need to cry. Like, I'll contrive that situation. I will get something that makes me cry like a baby. Which used to be Dear Zachary, a documentary that is just awful.
Don't even say it in front of me. Oh my God. Oh, Dear Zachary. It's
I know. Awful.
And amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
Absolutely fantastic.
It's just, I can't believe that's real life.
I mean, if for some reason you decide to watch the documentary, Dear Zachary, be in a place where you don't have to do stuff afterwards. Be in a place. Oh my God. That movie destroys me.
Yeah. There's another documentary. It's a documentary, not the movie The Whale.
Okay.
Because I know The Whale is a movie that came out recently, I guess.
Yeah.
With Brendan Fraser. The Mummy.
I didn't see it.
I didn't either.
The Mummy was also in it. I thought that was weird.
Was in it.
I think it's a Mummy sequel.
It probably is. That was a big franchise. No, the documentary The Whale is about this 4-year-old orca that got separated from its pod and like lived up in Washington somewhere. And the world was just trying to figure out what to do with it because it's a super social being, right? Like, you could argue that they have an even bigger capacity for emotional connection than even humans because they have this whole extra part of their brain that seems to function just for that.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, I really don't want to spoil it.
Okay.
But like, I cried all through the whole thing. And I just can't find where to stream it now. But like, it doesn't always work. So anyway, I just have to like contrive things sometimes I know when I need to do that, but I also have found in my journaling time or whatever, like I'll shed a few tears over something and then that's it. Like, if I need to, like, it's just coming out. And I can attribute that to diagnosis medication because it is clearing out all of the other stuff so I can focus on that for the time that it needs and let it go and release it. It's crazy. It's wild. I've never been like this before. And I would say that it is more adaptive.
It is weird because it is like this big change that for a lot of us happens in adulthood and not even really early adulthood. Because you said like what you diagnosed like 2 or 3 years ago?
9 months ago.
9 months.
Not even.
Jesus Christ.
July 2023.
Okay,
Why did I say it like that?
So yeah, I was in my mid 30s. You were in your late 30s. We're almost exactly the same age.
We
the
are.
latest of late 30s.
You're like 4 days older than I am.
I know,
or
right? But it is weird to kind of I think the closest thing, and it's totally different. I wouldn't mean to put myself in the shoes of another person, but like I know like transgender folks, if they're going on things like not steroids, what's the word I'm looking for? Hormones. Thank you. But that kind of becomes like a second now what's the word I'm looking for? Puberty. There we go. A second puberty.
Well, I can't do that psychic thing twice.
Right. But it's certainly not the same as that, but it is I mean, like in that genre of you going through this mind change at this later stage. And
yeah, I mean, definitely not the same thing, but the underpinnings overlap a bit. You could say,
Right.
for sure. I mean, I don't know. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
I'm grateful it happened because
Yeah.
some people, it takes a while. Like, it's never too late.
Yeah.
Until you're pushing up daisies.
That's true.
So this is like the perfect example of a conversation between two people with the neuro-D.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know that we were talking about like why it was a relief to get a diagnosis. So like real quick, why was it relieving for you?
I know for me, it's one of the things of not to brag, but I also have diabetes.
Brag. Touche. Bougie.
Right? I know, right? And I remember, I found out I had diabetes because I took my blood sugar. It runs in my family, and so often it does. And just as like a gag, I took it at my mom's house, and then the number that came back was like, "Whoa, that's not normal."
Clinical levels.
And my mom, who also has diabetes, she's like, "I've literally never seen it that high for me." And I was like, "Oh,
scary.
Okay, I should go see a doctor." And when I was in that situation, like if the doctor came back and said, "Oh, you don't have diabetes," then I would be terrified of whatever it was that is making my blood sugar so high. Like diabetes isn't great, but I understand it and it exists, and there are things that I could do to help. But if I had some mystery disease that was driving my blood sugar up, and I think a lot of that was the same for ADHD and getting the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Of like, if this isn't the particular thing, then why is this so hard for me? Why are these things in life so fucking hard for me? Because if it is this thing, then I can look at resources. I have a way to go. But if it's not, then there's this chance of like, maybe just life is fucking hard and it will never get any easier, which is scary.
Yeah, 100%. I kind of feel the same way. I mean, I kind of already knew, but pursuing a professional and medical diagnosis was necessary to get the thing that I thought was going to help me with the work situation, which it did, but not in the way that I thought. But it was validating for sure, because instead of just me just like guessing and just like making jokes like, the ADHD,
Right.
It's like, oh, this is real. And I struggle with, I don't necessarily see it as a negative, right, in my life. But if you're going to compare like all the things I've had to do to make my life functional versus what I imagine a neurotypical person might need to do, I've had to do a lot more adjustments, I would say, to make things work for me. So, I mean, a pill isn't the only thing, but it was the only thing I hadn't tried at the time. And I didn't realize just how illuminating that could be. And so with behavioral things in motion and with, medication in motion, I mean, I feel pretty unfucking stoppable.
Right.
Which I've never had this level of confidence. I've never had this feeling of just excitement for whatever's coming. And I don't think it's all going to be sunshine and roses. Okay, I'm not.
No.
My glasses are not rose colored. They're just regular. But I understand too that I'm equipped with whatever it is that I need, or I know how to access whatever it is I will need to make it. And that is pretty powerful. And I'd never felt that way before. Yeah. I mean, I guess I can just mic drop it there because like it's just been so life changing. So.
Well, in speaking of diagnoses, I think we're running out of time on this week's episode, but I think next week's episode is going to be all about diagnoses.
It is. So if you're curious about whether or not you should do this or how to do it or resources or whatever. Deep dive into our own stories, and who knows what we'll end up talking about, right? Because that's the beauty of this thing. Stay tuned for next week.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
And there will also probably be some more sprinkled in stuff about masking.
Thanks for tuning in to this. I guess it's not the maiden voyage, but it's the maiden voyage. Take 2. If you liked what you heard, could you please subscribe and rate us wherever you're tuning in? You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at InnerMoxiePod. If you want to write in and tell us your experiences, your stories, your feedback, whatever it is you want to say, myinnermoxiepod@gmail.com. You could follow me if you want on Instagram at Xanism, Zannism. I am a religion and a disease.
And if you just can't get enough of me, you can go listen to my podcast, my other podcast over at the Band Media Podcast. Also, I exist on all of the social medias, but I'm most active on TikTok, where you can find me at Band Ronnie.
Woohoo! So until next time, stay fresh, cheese bags. Just kidding.
I like just stay fresh cheese bags. What is that from? Or did you just
I
think
saw
of
it? It was a meme. And I just can't get it out of my head.
Right?
But I don't know why I have to add just kidding at the end. Because it's stupid, but it's funny.
You don't want our cheese bag listeners to stay fresh.
Don't get stale cheese bags. Stay fresh, for the love of God.
It's more like a cautionary tale now.
Yeah.
Don't want anybody to get listeria.
No. Okay.
Later.
Later. Bye.